What's up guys? Hope you're having a great one. This is the next in a series of videos designed specifically to help you go from tolerating SketchUp to actually enjoying it by focusing on increasing your productivity in the basic operations that you'll execute over and over and over again.
I feel the need for speed.
In this video, we'll focus on significantly increasing your speed in creating geometry by entering dimensions directly in SketchUp.
Mavericks inbound.
Now behind me, you'll notice a concrete desktop that I cast yesterday, 32 by 60, half-inch thick, 1.5 inch profile. I'm waiting just a little bit longer to unmold that. Now it's about as simple as it gets, but it'll serve as a great reference example for our exercises in SketchUp. Let's dive in. Okay, so here we are in SketchUp, and I'll model this upside down the same way we'd think about it as precasters. So I'll start with that top finished surface and work my way up. Again, that surface is 32 by 60, and I'll use the rectangle tool to model that. Now, anytime I'm drawing geometry in SketchUp, I like to start at the origin. It just helps keep me oriented in 3D space. Now, regardless of what type of shape you're drawing, it generally follows the same pattern. You'll click to establish a starting point, then you'll move to start to establish the dimension, and then you'll click to finish off that dimension to define that shape. So for a rectangle, I'd be defining those opposing corners. For a circle, I'd be defining the center of the circle and then its radius. Now, as simple as that is, if you look in the bottom right in the dimensions, where it's showing me real time what the dimensions are of the geometry I'm drawing, it's still pretty darn hard to land directly on the dimensions that I want. Now, part of that is due to the level of granularity and precision in this model. So I'm using a woodworking template whose precision is 1/64 of an inch. But the greater portion of the problem is it's just hard to land on an exact point in 3D space with a mouse. It's tedious, it's frustrating, it can be time consuming, but luckily there's a better way.
You want to get faster? Here's the secret.
Now the better, faster, more accurate way is to take advantage of the fact that not only is SketchUp telling me what those dimensions are, but it's allowing me to input the dimensions and tell it what I want them to be. So in this example, I know that I want the dimensions of my desktop to be 32 by 60, and I can enter those in directly. Now, depending on the operation you're performing, there might be a number of different inputs. So for a circle, it's just 1, the radius. In this case, for a rectangle, it's 2, the length and the width. Anytime you've got multiple inputs to enter, you separate those by a comma. So I'll enter 32, 60, and you'll notice it created a rectangle that's exactly 32 by 60. The only thing here is it's not oriented the way that I want it to be. I'll show you that in a second. The other way that you can do this is you can actually finish the operation that you were performing. So again, I'll start here at the origin. I'll go ahead and move out and then just click to finish that operation, and I can still specify the dimensions if I enter them immediately after finishing performing that operation. So again, I can type in 32, 60, and bang, there you go. If I had performed another operation after finishing off that geometry, it wouldn't let me do it because SketchUp would be confused about what I'm referring to. Now, the only thing to keep in mind here is the order of the dimensions. And sometimes it can be tricky because SketchUp's kind of random in terms of what dimensions it displays first, second, and so on. It's not always the same. So the easy way to identify that is to just draw something whose proportions are obvious, and then I can see very clearly that it has the red or x-axis dimension in first. That's that 56 and 61/64, and then the y dimension is second. So in this case, because I want to look at it oriented that way, I'll go ahead and type in 60 first and then 32. And again, this type of input mechanism can be performed on basically any operation you're performing in SketchUp. So if you're drawing geometry, you can enter the dimensions. If you're moving an object, you can enter the distance. Same goes for push-pull. If I'm measuring the radius of something or rotating something, I can enter it in degrees. Really, really powerful and extremely efficient. Let me show you more by finishing off this model. So the next thing I'll want to do is actually bring that up to dimension, that 1/2 inch thickness that I mentioned. Call me a pansy, it's fully supported, 1/2 inch is just fine for this. I'm going to do that using the push-pull tool. So I'll go ahead and select that, mouse over the face of the rectangle I just created, and I'll go ahead and click and pull that up to the dimension I want. Now, again, I could get that to a 1/2 inch, or I can just type it in directly, 1/2 or 0.5. SketchUp's smart enough to know what those mean and interpret that for me. Now the next thing I'll want to model is my return edges. So that profile all the way around is 1.5 inches by 1 inch thick. I'll start by modeling the thickness first, and I'll use the offset tool to do that. So I'll go ahead and click the offset tool, and then I'll just go to any of the edges on the perimeter of the face I just created as a result of the push-pull. I can go ahead and click that, and then I don't want to go out because that would create an offset outside of my finished dimensions of 32 by 60. Instead, I want to go inward, and I want to go in 1 inch to establish that 1 inch thickness. So I can just type in 1, hit enter, and there you go. Now, since I performed that on top of a face directly, SketchUp has actually generated 2 distinct faces that I can operate on independently. And that's perfect for my needs because what I want to do is just push-pull that outer face to, again, represent that drop edge. So I'll go ahead and select the push-pull tool again. Now, it's a little bit harder where I'm zoomed in at the moment to make sure that I'm over that. So here's another tip or trick. If you've got that 3-button mouse that I mentioned earlier, or a mouse that has a middle scroll wheel, you can actually use that to zoom in and out of your model. Super handy. So I'll go ahead and zoom in, and then I know where I'm placing my mouse exactly over that face that I want to operate on. I'll go ahead and select that, pull up, enter 1 inch. And remember, it's 1 inch because I've already established a 1/2 inch for the thickness of the top itself. So this extra inch will create that 1.5 inch outer profile. And there you go. There is my accurate representation of this desktop that I just created. And it took me a while simply because I'm talking and explaining. Literally, I can do this in about 30 seconds. Now, I'm going to finish this off and show you how I use this in particular for batch calculations. But if you're finding this helpful, please like and subscribe. I'm new to content creation, but apparently that'll help me and it'll help me help you. And if you have any questions, leave those in the comments below and I'll hit those right away. But back to finishing this off. You'll notice also in SketchUp when you select any entity and right click, SketchUp will give you information about that entity, right? So in the case of an edge, it's showing me the length of that edge. If I click on a face, it's showing me the surface area of that face. That's great, but what I really want is the volume. That's the measurement that'll help me accurately determine my batch calculation. Well, even if I select the entire thing here by triple clicking, SketchUp doesn't treat that as something that it can use to compute volume. What it needs is a closed solid, right? But it's simple enough. All I have to do is group this, and there's 3 ways to group. First, I could go to the Edit menu and select Make Group from there. Second, I could right-click and select Make Group from the drop-down, or the fastest way is just use the hotkeys. Command-G, G for Group on a Mac, or Control-G on Windows. Go ahead and hit that, and now it's created a group, and SketchUp thinks of that as a solid, and notice how it's now showing me the volume of that solid. That's perfect. That's exactly what I need for my batch calculation. Now, I could take that and divide that by 1728, and that'll give me the cubic feet, and that's what most of the mixes out there called for. But I've actually created my own spreadsheet calculator that takes in cubic inches directly because that's the unit of measure I work in most frequently, and it'll reverse engineer and perform the calculations for me. One less thing for me to compute, one less mistake for me to make.
Yo.
So let's go ahead and take that and now enter it into my spreadsheet calculator. So this one happens to be for Fishstone's GFRC mix design, which is a great GFRC mix, but the same would apply if it's Kodiak, Trinic, a Scratch quarter batch mix, whatever it is. They're all run around 0.37 to 0.4 cubic feet per bag. So I'll go ahead and enter the 1140 here, and it'll spit out everything I need: the amount of mix, water, the cement content, the plasticizer range, fiber loading, all of that stuff.
Yo.
So I took this and went ahead and batched up 90 pounds, which is 2 45-pound bags of GFRC mix, cast this, and sure enough, I had just a little under 10 pounds left over.
You got a gift, my friend.
Now, it's super satisfying to be that accurate with your batch calculations and have very minimal leftover for waste. Now, could I have measured that by hand and figured out the volume and done the calculations outside of SketchUp? Of course I could. I'm actually pretty good at math,
You figured that out. That's why you are who you are.
but I'm also pretty lazy, and I'd just rather have SketchUp do all that for me. Now, what I find most valuable is SketchUp also keeps me honest and makes sure I don't overlook things that are easy to take for granted. Take the drop edge, for example. This is a small piece, and that's still 12 pounds of mix. This was a direct cast monolithic SEC pour. It would have been kind of a bummer to end up short on the mix just because I forgot to include that drop edge.
You can say that again.
Okay guys, that's it for this one. Hopefully that was helpful. Again, if so, I'd really appreciate it if you'd like and subscribe. I know tips and tricks like these aren't the sexiest things in the world, but when you add them all up, I promise you that they will significantly increase your productivity in SketchUp. And again, turn it into something that you tolerate to something that you actually enjoy using. Any other questions? Hit me up in the comments below. But in the meantime, time to unmold this thing. I'll see you in the next one.